When the CCP sings mixed ownership reform the windfall from heaven, or a weasel paying New Year's greetings to the chicken. Here is Jersey's news commentary channel. Recently, a strange wind has suddenly swept through China's public opinion sphere. Quite a number of media outlets, especially a large number of hired self-media accounts, have begun intensively promoting claims such as state-owned enterprises can endorse private firms and mixed ownership reform can help private businesses break out of their 困境. They paint it in the most dazzling terms, as if once a private company's name is touched with a little bit of state capital color, it can instantly turn danger into safety, come back from the dead, receive immediate bank loans, reopen markets overnight, and emerge completely unscathed while state-owned and private enterprises develop in synergy in one harmonious ecosystem. Doesn't that sound like a giant pie suddenly falling from the sky? But the question is, are Chinese entrepreneurs, especially the older ones who have suffered losses before, really that easy to fool? Do they not know that on this land, the most dangerous thing is when someone suddenly walks up to you with a big smile and says, "I'm not here to take from you. I'm here to help you." This is not a fairy tale. This is Chinese reality. Very often, the first hand reaching into your front door always comes under banners like support, cooperation, empowerment, bailout, and win-win. From public information, this new wave of mixed reform fever is not appearing out of thin air. In July 2024, China's State-Owned Assets Supervision and Administration Commission openly stated at a press conference that the next step was to improve the institutional rules for cooperation between state-owned enterprises and private enterprises and continue to promote coordinated development and project docking. By 2025, the authorities released continuous signals of supporting the private economy. The February Symposium on Private Enterprises made a high-profile pledge. In April, the People's Daily systemically emphasized that the private economy has broad prospects and great promise. In May, the Private Economy Promotion Law officially came into force, writing into law support for private firms' participation in major projects and risk-sharing mechanisms. Please note, this is precisely the key issue. On the one hand, there is unprecedented rhetorical respect for private enterprise. On the other hand, institutionally, private firms are being accelerated into a governance framework that is more controllable, more penetrative, and easier for power to enter. The 2025 document jointly issued by the General Office of the CCP Central Committee and the State Council, Opinions on Improving the Modern Enterprise System with Chinese Characteristics, on one side says it wants all ownership structures to complement one another and develop together. But on the other side, it explicitly demands strengthening and improving party building in non-public enterprises, creating mechanisms in which party organizations and management conduct joint study, consultation, and structured communication. In other words, this is not simple market cooperation. It is a bundled package of capital cooperation, governance restructuring, political embedding. So today, the sales pitch for mixed reform goes like this: SOEs provide endorsement and help you obtain financing. SOEs do not interfere in operations, you remain yourself. SOEs do not demand dividends or intervention, they merely increase your credibility. After mixed reform, the company keeps private sector vitality while gaining SOE resources. This kind of wording has already been packaged into standardized sales copy on platforms like Douyin, repeated almost like copy and paste. The so-called benefits can roughly be summarized in 6 points. First, financing credibility. Once you wear the label of state capital, banks and suppliers suddenly think more highly of you. Second, policy credibility. Local governments, industrial parks, and project resources become easier to access. Third, market credibility. Customers, creditors, and capital markets begin to regard you as trustworthy. Fourth, risk buffering. Troubled firms, especially real estate developers, can use state capital entry to buy breathing room. Fifth, industrial coordination. SOEs bring land, licenses, channels, and supply chains, while private firms continue to deliver market responsiveness and efficiency. Sixth, identity bleaching. Private firms that were originally weak in regulation, financing, and public opinion try to rebuild credibility by wrapping themselves in a layer of state-owned clothing. Some real estate bailout cases have been promoted precisely through this logic. The problem is many of these so-called benefits are neither free nor unconditional. Credibility never appears out of thin air. So-called endorsement always corresponds to power entering. So-called enhanced credibility always corresponds to governance restructuring. So-called risk sharing always corresponds to a redistribution of control rights, veto rights, and even personnel rights. The legal texts say this very clearly. Cooperation between government and social capital must specify rights and obligations, profit allocation, risk sharing, and dispute resolution mechanisms. Read this carefully. The authorities speak of mechanisms, not charity. They speak of sharing, not unconditional rescue. They speak of rights and responsibilities arrangements, not free endorsement. More importantly, in China's political economic context, equity entry has never been merely a financial investment. It changes the board. Voting on major matters. The relationship between the firm and government, finance, and regulators. The future boundary of the enterprise's destiny. Some people say shareholders cannot legally interfere in daily management. Yes, the written law may say so. But in China, what truly determines a company's sense of safety is never just paper charters or legal clauses. It is who sits on the board. Who holds veto power. Who controls critical resources. Who stands behind them with higher political force. So why, of all times, has this flood of mixed reform is beneficial suddenly appeared now? The reasons are not mysterious. First, private firms are generally short of blood. Weak demand, shrinking profits, tighter financing, and overdue payments have pushed countless private businesses into the corner. Second, local governments are also short of money. As land finance declines, local state capital increasingly needs new spaces for capital operation, industrial leverage, and asset restructuring. Third, the authorities do not want to see private firms collapse on a large scale, yet they are equally unwilling to loosen control over economic lifelines and social resources. So the easiest method is to let state capital penetrate deeper into private firms under the banner of coordinated development, ultimately serving Xi Jinping's strategic arrangement of the state advances, the private retreats. Fourth, an entire intermediary industry chain has smelled the opportunity. As sui mixed reform has been turned into a business profiting through packaging, matchmaking, consulting, agency services, and traffic marketing. So this is neither accidental nor the spontaneous business creativity of a few livestream hosts. It is a targeted narrative driven by policy background. Real-world pressure. Profit incentives. Its surface purpose is bailout, stabilizing expectations, stabilizing financing, and stabilizing local economies. Its essence is to reabsorb increasingly drained private firms into a safer, more controllable, and more extractive system of state capital and political power. And when people look back at the public-private partnerships of the 1950s, what chills their spine is not that today is exactly the same. It is that the opening lines sound terrifyingly familiar. First, cooperation and win-win. Then, balancing public and private interests. First, peaceful transformation. Then, taking care of the original owners. First, the state helps you through hard times. Then, gradual incorporation into a higher level of management. Everyone knows the ending. From 1953 to 1956, 99% of private industrial firms and 82.2% of private commercial firms nationwide were absorbed into public-private joint operations or cooperatives. By 1966, the dagger was finally revealed. The CCP simply nationalized all remaining private enterprises in one sweep. For many business families, generations of hard work were wiped to zero overnight. Many owners were driven to jump to their deaths. Before and after public-private partnership, Shanghai even witnessed a wave of private bosses jumping from buildings. The most representative case was Liu Zuofu, China's shipping king and founder of Minxing Steamship Company, who took poison and ended his life after enduring continuous political pressure, public denunciation, and humiliation. Of course, today is not 1956, nor 1966. History does not mechanically repeat itself. But the logic of history is astonishingly consistent. In a system where property right boundaries are not secure and politics can override markets at any time, any entry of capital with political color is never merely a business act. It is a restructuring of power relations. In the short term, the damage may seem limited, and it may even extend a company's life. But in the long term, the enterprise is transformed from an independent 主体 into an attached subsidiary, from an autonomous market player into an embedded execution unit, until eventually the unit itself disappears. So my judgment on this wave of mixed reform propaganda is simple: this is not a pie falling from heaven. It is more like a weasel paying New Year's greetings to the chicken.